Hello, this is Mish, and welcome to this Taboo review. This was for episode 6. As always, this will contain spoilers, so if you're not up to date, go and watch it, then come back and have a listen. So let's break down this episode, point out some interesting aspects, and let the theories fly below in the comment section. So we start with Brace. Brace informs James that his father was a good man. We see James kind of ranting, I guess, in a negative way towards his father. Then Brace comes to his defense of James's father, as we have been painted a pretty dark image of James's father, so very selfish and insidious character he was. But the thing is, Brace mentioned that his mother tried to kill James as a baby. She tried to drown him, and his father saved him. So that was one of the reasons why he put his mother in an insane asylum, because she was a danger to him as a child. So we see James, I'd say, having his mind open to the possibilities and really struggling with that concept. So we see him visit the insane asylum, possibly trying to confirm if what Brace is saying is true or not. But we also see him a little while later have a moment where he's possibly having a clean or just kind of having a refresher in the little river there. And we see him have his sixth sense kicks in. So he kind of hears something. He hears someone laughing, which sounds like his mother's laugh. Then we see something tries to pull him under the water. Now, was that a vision, or was that reality? Was something physically trying to pull him under the water? If so, it's a big step in the power of the shamanism in this show, which is pretty interesting, pretty cool to see. But yeah, it's interesting how now previously James's visions that he had around his mother were always quite positive in a way that they seem to be for his benefit. But now he's starting to fear them, so that's an interesting twist on what's going on. Okay, now let's move on to the delivery of the powder. So very cleverly, James and his crew are using the cholera as a way to hide the movement of the powder. Great thinking as well when they get to the roadblock and they have the soldiers do a little bit of an investigation. Robert, James's son, hides in a coffin during the inspection. Now, if that didn't happen, that would have been a bloodbath, because you see Atticus and James ready their weapons just before that happens, and then they see what they think is the body of the child, and that's the end of the situation. So the powder was delivered to the Americans after being sped up in the manufacturing process by using chlorite. But holy smokes, that was a close situation during the stirring process. We see there that Robert managed to let everyone know, kind of wake everyone up, and it was pretty close. We also see Ibbotson. So now that's the guardian to Robert. He had issues with the factory and Delaney. So initially I thought it was more of a concern about safety because it might explode. But as the episode went on, we saw that kind of changed a little bit into more of a fear of James Delaney and his shamanistic abilities, and maybe that he's a devil. And that word's referenced quite a few times in this episode. So I think that was the final key when they left, and Ibbotson saw the scratching of marking in the pillar. And so he went off to confess. He had real problems at that point with himself, so he went to confess his sins and the whole situation there. So we see he told a priest. Then that priest went and told the East India Company. Not the East Indian Company. Thanks, Vladdy777, for correcting me there. I was saying East Indian Company as a mistake. It's East India Company. So the East India Company makes moves to ascendancy at that point, to catch Delaney, because they now think they've got the upper hand, because they know what's going on. But luckily, Godfrey, the note-taker, runs down the road and lets James Delaney know. So they quickly ferry the current batch down the river. East India Company, being extremely angered by this turn of events, they mention they're taking the gloves off. So they just blow up James's ship, which is quite comical, but also, not for James. So the thing is, what's made this more insult to injury for James here is that this ship should have been guarded by one of the hired helpers, Atticus's helpers. So it was the guy that had his thumb cut off. So then we see what happens to him. Clearly James is not happy with that situation. Then, speaking of the East India Company, we get further confirmation about the influence. So that's the ship, the Cornwallis, which was its previous name. and the sinking around it. This makes a lot of sense now. We're getting more information about this because we've seen James's visions in prior episodes about him nailing shut a hatch and slaves in that hatch. Then obviously the starting sequence is people floating in the water, drowning. And we've seen James wake up from that scene as well, wake up from a drowning scene. So this makes sense to what Mr. Chichester is saying as well. So Mr. Chichester had a meeting with Benjamin and Pettifer from the East India Company. Now we see him really dish out the information and dish out the blow after blow with showing that he has them locked down. Mr. Chichester really has all bases covered with the situation. I'm not sure how the East India Company will get out of this. The only thing I can think of is that they'll somehow make a deal with the Prince Regent and kill Mr. Chichester. That's the only way I can see them getting out of this. Okay, now, whilst this is all going on, so during this whole scenario with the East India and James and everyone, we see Lorna. Now, Lorna's concerned about James's whereabouts because he just disappeared. After he had that conversation with Brace, he just ran off. So she ends up visiting Zilpha, which really doesn't do much good at all. Remember last week, Zilpha was beaten and had an exorcism as well. So she, in her current mindset, is more about survival, I think. That was my feeling of it. She was more saying, get out of here, you're just going to cause issues. Then, speaking of Zilpha, we see her take her revenge, sweet revenge upon Thorn. And she stabs him in the heart with what looks to be a hair device. To keep your hat on, you shove this big spike through your hair, apparently. And that's what she used to stab into his heart. Now, what I will say, Thorn was a horrible, horrible character. But what an amazing actor to be able to deliver that character like that. So Jefferson Hall thought he did a really good job because I hated Thorn. So just the fact that you can actually see someone on screen like that and hate them for what they've done and how they act is a testament to his acting ability. So I think that's pretty good. Hats off to that guy. Then we see Zilpha run straight over to James. Now this was an interesting scene. Immediately, I assumed this would be quite a happy scene, a celebration scene, but it quickly turns to concern and a sense of danger. And I think it's about the point where Zilpha says, I killed him like you told me to. And at that point, you've seen James's face. He didn't tell her to. So that's what the question arises, who did? Confirmed for me when James says to her, when did I, and he finishes there. And I think he was going to say, when did I tell you to kill him? So that was pretty intense. I think James may be putting two and two together here around his mother and his sister, that whatever drove his mother to try and kill James's baby perhaps is trying to control Zilpha. But that is once again another topic, and it could be quite in depth as well. But either way, pretty concerned about where that's going. We also see after burying Thorn, so James digs a hole and they bury Thorn. Then Zilpha and James, pretty awkward scene. You know which one I'm talking about. Anyway, we see that James ends up losing control of himself and nearly killing Zilpha by choking her. He was lost within his visions. And this is really the start of a slippery slope for James in this episode. So, and on top of that, so he nearly kills Zilpha. Then he's also lost his boat. So he goes and visits Helga to try and start the process of getting a new boat. But he isn't helped because he's really tired, and she mentions it there, and he's drinking heavily. Combine this with the betrayal of Ibbotson, and we see that he had his tongue cut out for the betrayal. The loss of his boat, once again, another betrayal of the ship's guard, which he took care of, information about his mother, possibly being actually legitimately insane, troubles with Zilpha, and also what happened to him nearly killing Zilpha. So he starts to wander off, heavily drunk, into the water, and only to be saved by Winter, who kind of lures him back with the possibility of more drink. But poor Winter, who it looks like James just blacked out. But when he woke up, Winter is now dead. Poor Winter. But the question here is, did he kill her? Quite likely, but I want to hope he didn't, because I think that would be a sad betrayal of those two characters. But either way, what a great episode. Things went forward in the story, but much to James's anguish, it all went backward in his plans. So questions for this week. We say Zilpha killed Thorn, but are you in agreement that it wasn't James that told her? And if it wasn't James, who was it? Was it James's mother? Was it that shamanistic ability that we're seeing? Was it a spirit? Or is it just something inherently evil about the Delaney's? Okay, on to the next question. Did James kill Winter? Now with the blackout scene, we see James blackout and the vision of his mother pops up. You see her face again, which definitely suggests that there's going to be a drowning, because that's what she's trying to do. So are we assuming that James was possessed by his mother's spirit and he drowned Winter? That's kind of the logical scenario here. But on one side of me says, I hope that didn't happen, because I think that James and Winter, it was quite a cool friendship that they were making. Okay, now the last question. How will the East India Company get out of the case from the prince? So the one being held by Mr. Chichester. So Mr. Chichester has all the bases covered, like I mentioned before. He knows everything, and he's really got them. There's no way they can get out of this situation. But the only way, I think, is if they pay off the Prince Regent. So make a deal with him, because we know that Coop and the Prince are pretty dodgy, and they can be paid off, and many deals can be made which will easily swing their attitude and decisions. But Mr. Chichester doesn't seem like he's going to budge. He seems pretty adamant, and he wants to, bring them to justice. So I think they will pay out the Prince and probably dispose of Mr. Chichester. As sad as that will be, but I hope that Mr. Chichester does get some vengeance and some justice, because he seems like a pretty cool character. So I'll leave this here. Thanks for watching. I really enjoy Taboo and discussing these episodes and trying to predict what will happen. Please let me know how you found this video. As always, really appreciate your feedback. Thumbs up if you like it. Obviously thumbs down if you didn't. And subscribe for future content from myself. So until next time, this is Mesh, and I'll see you later.